Hey everybody, it's time for your weekly I Wish podcast, The Cap and Kirk Show. We're sorry we haven't been on the air for quite some time, but we're really busy, and but we want you to know music is our number one priority. We're going to try to do more podcasts. I have wanted to do podcasts on several new rock albums that have been out. There was a great Deep Purple one, but I didn't get time to do it. Then there was a new Styx one, and it wasn't any good. Very bad bummer, Styx. Then there was a great Sheryl Crow one. She left country, which never supported her, went back to her roots. It was awesome. I thought I was going to do a podcast on her. Still too busy, but definitely bad news about Tom Petty dying. And we are going to do a podcast on him and hope that it does him justice.
It won't.
Well, now that you say that, Rick, you're probably right.
We'll try, though.
Since my intro was too long anyways. Okay, I like to start with my two favorite songs, which were my favorite songs weeks ago, but it's titled Two Favorite Songs This Week. The first one is Praying by Kesha.
I hope you find your peace, falling on your knees, praying.
That is such a moving song. I'm so proud of her. I know she's talking about Dr. Luke, and I know what he did, and that song is amazing. If you haven't listened to it, look up her live version on YouTube. It's awesome. The next one is, wish I was telling you about this 6 months ago when I discovered it, but now it's a big hit. It's called Wish I Knew You When I Was Young by the Revivalists. What I like about it is how they sound kind of like old rock and roll. And and I've seen them. They're a young band, kind of hairy looking. So that's nice. It's nice that somebody can take and have
Kinda
the
like
old
Rick.
sound. They are like Rick.
He's a little hairy looking.
Yes, Mr. Porter. So we have all of our favorite podcastees here in the room tonight. We have Rick back. We really missed him. We've got Mr. Porter back.
Hello.
Fans said he was amazing.
I got a room at the top of the world tonight. I got a room at the top of the world tonight.
Okay, that's a great song. Tom Petty does have a room at the top of the world tonight, and I hope he's looking down on us and giving us some good vibrations. That sounds like a Beach Boys intro.
does.
Yeah.
Sorry, Beachies. Anyway, where to start? All this material, you go and start trying to find out stuff about Tom Petty, and it's an endless thing of material, and how many songs he's got is unbelievable. I'd like to start with what I heard from Rod Argent, a friend of his, and he's the one that did that old song, Hold Your Head Up, and he was in the Zombies. And it turns out that the first concert that Tom Petty ever went to was Rod Argent and the Zombies. And amazingly enough, the lead guitarist of the Heartbreakers also went to that, and it was his first concert, but they didn't know each other at the time. And Tom Petty just loved it, and he has been a huge Zombies fan ever since. He has said that if they were a viable band right now, they would be one of the top bands in the world. And he liked them so much that once he revived a B-side of theirs that Rod Argent didn't even hardly remember doing. It's called I Want You Back. And he made it popular enough that then when there was concerts, people would scream wanting to hear that, and Argent would have to play it. And he he talked about he only did one concert as a front band for Petty, and it happened to be the only concert of Petty's I ever went to. It was at Jackson Hole, Wyoming. And he was talking about, as many people talk about, what
Didn't
a
you
great...
say you missed Argent?
I
that the same
missed
concert?
half of it.
Oh.
I came when Hold Your Head Up was playing, and I was like, I didn't know what Rod Argent and the Zombies was. I was so upset, and they were such a good band. They House of the Rising Sun is one of their songs.
Wow.
And so we missed half of their concert. But anyways, Argent was talking on Tom Petty radio after Petty died, saying how he went to that concert and they did their set. Then they were out waiting for Tom Petty to come on. They were going to watch him. And he ran on like a wild man, jumped up on the stage and started his set. And then he looked over and he saw those guys standing there. And he's like, wait a minute. And he just left, stopped the music, and he went over and talked to him for a few minutes. And then he went back and started the concert. And Rod Argent just said, that was just amazing. I couldn't believe he did that for us. I didn't even know him. But then it turns out, really, Argent was one of his, idols. So, an interesting little story. There's a lot of stuff on Tom Petty radio.
Tom Petty. Tom
Yes.
Brady.
Tom Non-Brady radio. And it's very interesting. They're doing a lot of tributes right now. A lot of people. There was one lady. She had seen 102 times more concerts than I have of his. And I would say that is a lot of concerts, yes. And so it's pretty amazing, all of the fans he's got. Anyway, as I like to do, I like to start out with how they grew up. And I saw an interview with his dad, and Tom was a young rebel, even at the age of 4. Once he wanted to go to town on his own, and his dad says, you can't go to town, you can't do that. Next thing he knew, Tom was gone, and he had headed to town, and when he got back, he got a butt whipping. But his dad said he was kind of proud of him for how cool it was that he took off and went to town, and he was just a rebel and a prankster all the time. It talked about how a member of his family had those type of pajamas that the butt would open up on or something, and Tom would unsnap it and pour a bunch of stuff in it and snap it back up or something. But anyway, he got to see Elvis when he was 10. He went to a movie set, and I think his dad was working there or something, took him there.
His uncle worked
His
on it.
uncle, you
Yeah,
saw
I
that,
saw
huh?
that.
And then he just fell in love with Elvis and thought that was really cool. And it started making him think of what he was going to do with his life. And then when he was about 12, he saw the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show. And he was like, now that is something I could do, what they're doing. And knowing what you know now about Tom Petty, it really was something he could do because he was born with it. He was born knowing how to play music and how to write music. He's even admitted that. So that was the way he headed. By the time he was... Oh, another little story was when he was in 5th grade. You're 10, 11 years old.
Yeah.
Most of the kids didn't even know what rock and roll was, and he knew all the lyrics to all the songs. And somebody asked him if he went home and memorized them, but he just knew them from just listening. And so he was really paying attention to music at a young age. His dad bought him his first guitar for $24. And when he was 14, he started playing guitar. Interestingly, one of his very first guitar teachers was Don Felder of the Eagles. You knew that too, Rick?
I read that, yeah.
Where the heck were you reading? This is all secret stuff.
Very secret.
Yes. So, all right. Then by the time he was a senior, he was already in his second band, and he had missed 42 days already. So he dropped out and went into his world of music. His dad was pretty upset with him, and it took him...
Just another example of education doesn't pay.
No. Didn't pay for me. I'm just smarter than heck and broke. Anyways, his dad, it took him forever to start believing that he actually had a career. He helped start a little band in 71 called Mudcrutch. And they had the Mike Campbell guy that I told you about, some other local guys. This was in Gainesville, Florida. And Mike had a little kind of cabin with a few acres of fenced land. I believe it was fenced. And they would go play there, and all of a sudden they decided they were going to have a festival there. And 4,000 or 5,000 people showed up, and they kept having it... they kept having the police come in there and shut it down. Then they'd start it up and shut it down on and off. And he said it was so much fun. And but Mudcrutch was just basically a local band. They headed to L.A. to become famous, and it didn't work out. And that was in about 74. But they did sign a contract with Shelter Records. Then... and they did a little album. Then they broke up, and Tom did an album with session players, and he just didn't like working with session players. And he went to, he got invited to a guy's house, and it turned out that it was Mudcrutch, and they had started a new band. There was a few new guys, and Tom liked them, and he had a studio, so he invited them to come over and be his studio players, or really his new band is what it turned out to be. And that's how they were born, Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. That's kind of why, although they were a total identity, it just kind of started out with that dual name. So I found that interesting. So they did their first album in 76, but it was not popular. And a song off of it, let's see, Breakdown, hit in England and became fairly popular. So they went over there to promote it, and he said it was amazing. They got off the plane, and it was like they were rock stars, and everybody was cheering them and everything, and they were nothing in America. Then they came back, and they played at the Whiskey A Go Go as a front band for Blondie. And then they kind of hit. And finally that song Breakdown hit. That was their first top 40 song. On that album was also,
We said all there is to say.
Anyway, so that's a clip of Breakdown, and now a little clip of American Girl.
She was an American girl. Well, it was kind of cold.
So that was American Girl, and interestingly enough, that was the very last song they ever played in concert. And it is interesting what a big hit that is now, but it really never really hardly hit back when it was made. It just kind of got picked up on and just later, got big. Then in 78, they did an album called You Are Gonna Get It. That was their first top 40 album. And that had this song.
She's gonna listen to her heart. It's gonna tell her what to do.
Mr. Porter, you haven't been saying much.
I have not. Hard to get a word in edgewise with the captain.
Do it
Yes.
edgy.
When he's on
do
a-
it, do it
He's on a roll.
edgewise.
It's hard.
He's on a profound
Yeah.
roll there.
Just blown away
Okay.
by your words of wisdom here.
Yeah. Don't get in his way.
All right, so that was Listen to Her Heart from You Are Gonna Get It. Now we're going to listen to I Need to Know.
I need to know. I need to know. If you think you're gonna leave, then you better say so. I need to know. I need to know. Because I don't know how.
I need to know. I need to know. I need to know. Don't I know?
Oh, he's been holding back. Captain
Captain.
has a voice, has a singing voice. He was right on pitch.
And they're never
does.
going to hear it.
Oh, no.
Never
Oh,
going
that's
to.
that's hitting the that's going to the edit room floor.
Oh, that's right. No, Captain does have a
When
singing
I
voice.
sing, you'll know it.
You haven't heard singing
You'll
yet.
wish you hadn't heard it. We're to 1978 now. 78. And now I'm from down south. Kind of
Oh, is
wish
that
I
what that was?
We're down to where Tom Petty actually fought with the music industry. I told you how his band Mudcrutch had gone and gotten a contract. Turned out they were getting about $10,000 per album given to them, and then their royalties off of their songs in this contract were so low they couldn't even pay back the $10,000 with it. And that's how bad their contract was. So here they were getting popular. It had 4 hits by now, and this Shelter Records sold Petty's contract to MCA, and Petty said it made him feel like a piece of meat. And he probably wouldn't have felt like that was bad if it was a piece of meat that had good money in it. But it was already a really poor contract, so Tom decided to fight him. And for breach of contract, of one thing, they couldn't sell his contract without talking to him about it. But he didn't have any money, and they had all the lawyers. So a big lawsuit started. In the meantime, he funded his 3rd album himself, and his bill was up to $500,000 on
Holy
it.
smokes.
And he kept fighting the MCA, and then he figured out he was broke. And his lawyer said to him, you know, since you're broke, you could do bankruptcy, and then all these contracts would just be nothing, and a judge would rewrite everything, and you would get to start over. So he went into bankruptcy, and that really threw MCA for a loop. And then a guy at MCA decided, actually, it'd be best for everybody if we figured out a good deal. So that guy came up with a deal that was good pay and fair for Petty, and talked with Petty, and so then he ended up, everything got dropped, and he worked for MCA. And the article I was reading said that actual deal changed everything for everybody. That was when artists actually started getting paid for their work. So, because I remember a band, Grand Funk, that went broke because they never had any good contracts and never got royalties from their songs. And so it's pretty interesting. So then that album, the 3rd album, got released. What was the name of it, Kent? Oh, Kent's not here. Mr. Porter.
Thank you. Yes, I do not know.
Damn the Torpedoes. You remember that
I do
one?
remember that.
Okay, that was their 3rd album. That was back in the day when you looked like Tom Petty. Mm-hmm. I remember meeting you. This would have been in '78.
Had
That
blonde-
is
blonde
darn near.
hair.
Yeah, that's darn near when I met you. It was in about 78.
That was.
And you reminded me of Tom Petty, actually. You had that little brat pickup you drove around
Yes, I did. I would not back down.
in. No, you didn't back down. And so anyway, Damn the Torpedoes hit, and it went triple platinum. So it sold over 2 million copies, and it had this hit.
Somebody must have kicked you around some.
To be like a refugee,
Don't have to live
like a refugee.
Somewhere, somehow, somebody will push you around some. Tell me why. It's around him.
Ah, you sound just like
That was
Tom
a little
Petty.
nasalier than him.
That
What's-
wasn't him. That was Bob Dylan.
Oh, yeah. You know, he later toured with Bob Dylan. What was amazing, Tom Petty had a few different voices when he sang because he could actually sing really good.
Yeah.
But what I remember him for is kind of his hillbilly type singing, and I loved it.
Yeah, like that song actually was a little
Yeah.
bit of his hillbilly sing.
So, Damn the Torpedoes was number 2 for 7 weeks, and so that's good money. And then there was also this song on it.
Don't do me like that. Don't do me like that. Oh, I love you, baby. Don't do me like that. Don't do me like that.
So that was Don't Do Me Like That. A big hit. Everybody recognizes that. Here's another one that was on it.
Baby, even the losers get lucky sometimes. Even the losers.
That was Even the Losers. Another top 10 hit. Interestingly enough, Tom Petty had 28 top 10 hits, more than anyone. Another song off of Damn the Torpedoes.
You know, sometimes I don't know why, but this old town just seems so hopeless.
Okay, yeah, that's your new song, Ricky. Here Comes My Girl.
All right.
Yeah, man, when I got that little girl standing right by my side, you know, I can tell the whole wide world that shout it, hey, here comes my girl.
So anyway, now we're to 1981 in the discography. I'm not even going to try to say it. It's your fault. You were supposed to say it, Rickster.
Discography.
Oh, good.
Discography.
Thank you, Mr. Porter, our official.
Linguist.
Yes. So we're to 1981. Don't know what we're talking about.
Okay, now
But-
I want to hear your English accent.
But English,
British.
don't do British, boy.
He only does English.
All right, so we're to 1981. They've come out with another album, Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, that is, called Hard Promises. This one became a top 10 hit, which at that point was probably their best album. I don't know why Damn the Torpedoes wasn't, but they kind of came on slow compared to, like, say, Boston, who their first album was a smash, you know? So that's interesting. On it, they had a single called The Waiting. Here's a clip of it.
Yeah, the waiting is the hardest part. Every day you see one more card.
But it still
But
sounds
not-
like There Went Ricky's Girl.
Ricky's girl. Oh boy.
It seems like no matter what song you play, it's There Went Ricky's Girl.
Every song ever written is about my
song ever
girl
written.
going somewhere,
And this one
Not
is
with
Ricky's
me.
new song, The Waiting.
waiting, still waiting.
Still waiting.
So that was The Waiting, and sometimes that is the hardest part, especially in your case, huh, Rick?
That is the hardest part.
But one day it'll all be worth it for you. Anyway, about this time, he had his first duet with Stevie Nicks.
So you had a little trouble in town. Now you're keeping some demons
So now we're to 1982, and their first bass player quit the band due to he wanted a home life. What a bugger.
That bugger.
And they kind of
Home life.
laughed
Who wants
about
a
him.
home life?
He was married, and so he wanted to, they were always on tour, always in the studio. But then this guy ended up having a little bikini shop down there at Malibu or wherever he was at, and they always kind of laughed about his new life. But it
home
sounds
life.
okay. Yeah, we'll call that the home life. And now the new lineup in Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers lasted till 94. Their single that they had right now is called You Got Lucky.
Good love is hard to find. You got lucky, babe. You got lucky, babe. When I found you.
Not about me.
And that's the song about Mr. Porter and his new girlfriend. But anyways, back to Tom Petty.
Yes.
Now we're to what we're calling the Southern Accents time in their career. That was the name of the album that came out in 84. And they didn't have a producer. And Dave Stewart from the Eurythmics came and was helping them make this album. And basically it turned into a giant party. And for 2 years, they worked on the album and partied, and I guess it just got to be known as the party spot, and everybody from Hollywood would come up, and he said there were actually some really bad people that showed up. There weren't always good times, and there was lots of drug use. And then one day, Petty was getting really mad during a mixing session. He said to everybody, "Listen, this is the way this song was at the very first. Listen to it now and listen to it then." And he got really pissed off and slammed his fist into a wall. Turned out it was right where a stud was. And he pulverized 5 bones in his hand. And it was so bad that the doctor said, "You're never going to play guitar again." And he said, "Don't ever say never to me." And so he had him rebuild it with wires and studs, and he had physical therapy, and 9 months later he started playing guitar and they started touring again.
Oh, wow.
So that brings us to 1985 and probably his most famous video. And the song is Don't Come Around Here No More. Here's a clip.
Don't come around here no more. I'm giving up. Stop.
So that's Don't Come Around Here No More. This is probably their most famous video. You know, it's back in 85, back when MTV was just getting going, and videos were pretty plain, and he went over the top with this thing. It was Alice in Wonderland themed, and Petty is the Mad Hatter, but poor Alice, I'm not sure she didn't take a whole bunch of LSD, because she just kept seeing stuff different. She'd look at him, he'd have a big hat on, he'd have this giant cup. Next thing she knew, she'd have a little teeny cup. When she thought she had a big one, she'd look over at him and there was only hat, and then it'd lift up and there was little Tom Petty with a little glass. Every time she looked, something was changing. And at the end, after a whole bunch of crazy stuff, Alice is a cake. And him and the Heartbreakers cut it up and eat the cake. And she's watching. Actually, really well done when you consider it was over 30 years ago.
Yeah,
Very
I
nice
That's crazy.
special effects. So I loved that video. I had never seen it until today. And that takes us to we're still in 85 or so, 86, and Bob Dylan contacted them, and that was an idol of Petty's, and he talked him into going on a world tour with him and being the front band. And I believe the Heartbreakers also played for Dylan as his backing band. But anyway, that probably explains why one of Tom Petty's best covers that I've heard a lot lately is Knocking at Heaven's Door. And oh my heck, it about brings tears to your eyes now, because there he is singing that song, and you just know he's in heaven. I mean, playing with the big guys up there. And probably Jesus is listening, because you don't have good music here if that isn't what God intended.
Yeah.
So I feel good about Petty, but it's too bad we don't have him anymore. So now we're to 1987, and he actually co-wrote a song with Dylan called Jamming Me. Anyway, so now we're to 87. He comes home from this 2-year world tour with Dylan, and he's home. It's early in the morning. One of his daughters wasn't in the house, but Petty, his wife, and one daughter and a housekeeper were in his house. And all of a sudden, his daughter comes running in and says, "The house is on fire." And he literally had to work hard to get everybody out of there. He literally saw the housekeeper with her hair on fire. And I pictured this big old bun on top on fire. But he said he literally got them out, and at the end he was crawling out the front door trying to keep out of the flames. And that whole house burnt down. One of the band members was talking about he was watching TV, and on the news it says Tom Petty's house is on fire. And he drove over there, and all there was ashes. And Tom talked about how he worked really hard and saved a few cars and had sent his wife and them away. And then he got to where they were and wasn't even wearing shoes. And then everything was gone except he had a basement studio, and it was saved with a lot of old recording tapes and stuff. So that was nice. And he talked about, as many people do, how at first you're like, wow, I've lost everything. Then you realize you've got your life, and it's kind of almost like you're reborn again. And he says you just start accumulating stuff again, you move on, and it was almost like a new part of life for him. So now we're to 1989, and we're going to hear a clip of Free Fallin'.
She's a good girl, loves her mama, loves Jesus in America.
Free Fallin' is a great song. I think everybody in the world knows it. And the video is pretty cool. It's kind of like what it would be if you grew up in Southern California back in 89 and were a teenager. A lot of skateboarding, a lot of scantily dressed girls riding skateboards. And on this video, interestingly enough, there were some vampire boys, and they kind of had, they didn't have fights. It was like they would leave with the girls, and then the bad boys in their cars would kind of be around, like wanting the girls. It was not a lot to it, but a really good feeling video. I loved it. This was from his album, Full Moon Fever. I actually had the cassette to Full Moon Fever and was listening to it just the other day because Tom Petty had died. And I pulled it out and I was like, what a great, not CD though, cassette. And here's another song from Full Moon Fever.
You can stand me up at the gates of hell, but I won't back down. No,
At the gates of hell, but I won't
Back down.
So that was I Won't Back Down. And interestingly enough, this was a solo project of Tom's. It really upset the Heartbreakers because they thought he would be done with them. But interestingly enough, most of them were on it in certain places. There was a little co-writing done with Mike Campbell, the lead guitarist of the Heartbreakers. But the main contributor to the album was Jeff Lynne, and he was the founder of Electric Light Orchestra. You probably don't know who that is, do you, Rick?
No idea.
But they
ELO.
were very famous. ELO is their short version. And so he had just met Jeff Lynne doing a project with George Harrison, the Beatle. And so they became quick friends. One more hit from Full Moon Fever now.
Yeah, running down a dream that never would come to me. Working on a mystery.
So that was Running Down a Dream, another big hit from that time of Full Moon Fever. Full Moon Fever was a great album. Then a tour came on, like after every album, and the Heartbreakers played on the tour, and they were like, it was kind of weird because it wasn't our album, and we didn't even like some of those songs, not those hits, but there were other songs, but it's interesting hearing what the Heartbreakers have to say and how they felt close to it was all over, but sometimes when you're as close as these guys were, it's good to have just a little bit of a break. And that's how Tom saw it. So now we're to 88 and just a little bit before Full Moon Fever. And that is when George Harrison from the Beatles invited Petty to be on a song called Handle with Care. When he got there, also Roy Orbison was there, Bob Dylan, and Jeff Lynne. And they sang the song, and it ended up so good they decided they had to have it be their own song.
Which song did they do?
Handle with Care.
Oh.
And that was the biggest hit of the Traveling Wilburys, is what they ended up calling their group. And so they went along for a time, and some of their songs were stolen that hadn't been released and bootlegged as Traveling Wilburys Volume 2. So when the Wilburys actually put out another album, it was titled The Traveling Wilburys Volume 3. And I always thought I had never gotten Volume 2, but now I hear there wasn't a Volume 2. So that was interesting.
Mr. Porter got Volume 2, though, somehow.
Yes.
He liked those bootleggers.
Yes.
And maybe Roy Orbison was on Volume 2 because he died, and so he wasn't on Volume 3. And so that takes us to 91, where they did the album In the Great Wide Open. Here's a clip.
Into the great wide open, under them skies of blue.
So that was Into the Great Wide Open. The video of that's really cool because now videos, they were starting to hire actors to be in them. And in this one, they had Johnny Depp. This was in 91. And The Great Wide Open is about a guy named Eddie that gets a guitar and starts getting to be a player and goes into the big time. So Johnny Depp's playing Eddie. And Faye Dunaway is in it. She starts out
I don't
kind
even
of...
remember all this.
You'll have
Go
to
watch
watch
it.
it. This was one of his greatest ones. And Faye Dunaway was in it. And she goes and is showing Depp, or Eddie, and his girlfriend a place to stay. So she's kind of the landlord, but she befriends him. And then it's showing Depp, and he's singing and playing in the band, and he's getting big. And then in the song, Petty says he's got a roadie named Bart, and Petty is the roadie. Then it looks like Faye Dunaway becomes the manager. The song's talking about the manager. And then Johnny Depp, or Eddie, he goes crazy like so many rockers do. The girlfriend gets mad at him, throws stuff in the pool at him. He rides off on his motorbike with the roadie, which was Petty. And then it's saying stuff like rebel without a clue. And he loses his contract. He destroys stuff, knocks over motorcycles. Then at the very end, Petty closes a book like he's been reading out of a book and says, and they all live happily ever after. So it was really just a well done story video. You like bedtime stories,
Oh,
don't
I
you,
do.
Rick?
Bedtime stories.
It was a very good bedtime story. So now, and this, now we're to a song that only showed up on their greatest hits CD, and this was a very famous song. See if you know what it is.
Oh my, oh hell yes. You got to put on that party dress. It was too cold to cry when I woke up alone. I hit my last number, I walked to the room.
This is a good video too. You got to watch this video.
Oh, do I?
Last Dance with Mary Jane.
Oh, yes. There's no last dance with
I
Mary Jane.
thought he was talking about weed all the time, and
Me too.
JR was one of the ones that told me, no, you got to see the video. It's about a lady corpse.
Oh, I see.
Mary Jane is a corpse.
But I think it really is talking about Mary Jane.
It could be subliminally
Yes.
how you can't ever have enough Mary
You
Jane.
can't.
Ooh, maybe I need more Mary Jane.
Maybe I need to start
I've
some
only
Mary
had
Jane.
16 and a half years. If I start up, you better go with me.
Oh, no. If you start up, I've got to start.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Yeah.
We'll have to be up on top of Table Rock.
Oh, we'll be on top of something.
We'd go with Kent, but he wouldn't make it.
He'd be dead on the trail.
Out of shape.
He would be dead before we left the parking lot.
Last dance with Mary Jane. One more time to kill the pain.
So that was Last Dance with Mary Jane. That was in '93. This is a really good video. Petty is a young guy working for an undertaker, and he opens up a body bag, and inside is a beautiful lady. In fact, it's Kim Basinger. And he falls in love with her. He starts unzipping it more, and he's holding her hand and stroking it, and he's like, she can't stay here. All of a sudden, it just shows him zipping up the bag and taking her out on a gurney, and the mortician's looking at him like, what the heck? And off he goes. Of course, the guy doesn't stop him. So then he takes her to his home. He dresses her up in just a really fancy dress, has a fancy table like the length of a pool table, and it's all made up fancy. She's sitting at one end, and he's sitting there looking at her, and she's trying to flop over, and he's always straightening her up. And then it shows her dancing with him. So then he dances with her, and then it shows him carrying her, and he carries her out to the ocean, kind of goes down a cliff, gets to a rocky part. It's not beachy, rocks, waves. Lays her down carefully in the water. He heads up, and at the end of the video, she opens her eyes underwater. It is creepy.
Oh, that is creepy.
It was.
I do
was
not
like,
remember that. I'm going to be watching it.
yeah,
later on.
that was an awesome video. And like I said, Tom Petty was actually known for making great videos. And he helped, like I said, back at the very start, keeping MTV and showing people how to push the envelope. So that was interesting. So the next song that he did that got famous was Stop Dragging My Heart Around
Oh, yeah.
with Stevie Nicks. And what a great duet. Very popular. It turned out they did a lot of duets, and she toured with him some, and there's a lot of great videos of him and her singing together. So anyway, we're to 94 now, or 90. We've been talking about 93 and how they made Mary Jane's Last Dance and a song called Something in the Air. Then their guy Stan Lynch left the band. I think he was their drummer. And that was another... There's been very few changes in the Heartbreakers, so that was about the last change that I know of. They replaced him. They pretty much said right after the sessions of getting those 2 songs for the greatest hits, he just walked out and never said goodbye, and he was gone. So I don't know what happened there. But although we're to 94, what's interesting is back in 89, while he was still with MCA, he secretly signed a contract with Warner Brothers to do an album for them. So it took him till 94 to get out of his MCA contract by doing this Greatest Hits CD. And so in 94, he released Wildflowers, which was a solo album. And it had some great hits. You Don't Know How It Feels, You Wreck Me, It's Good to Be King, and A Higher Place. It was produced by Rick Rubin, a very famous producer. He's done some Chili Peppers. He pretty much resurrected the Dixie Chicks after they had all their problems and made it, just the most fantastic album for the Dixie Chicks. And just one of the greatest producers. Now we're to 96, and he did a soundtrack. Him and the Heartbreakers did a soundtrack for a movie called She's the One. Cameron Diaz, how do you say it? I said it wrong. Diaz.
Yeah.
I don't know. She's cute and hot.
Yeah.
She was in it, and Jennifer Aniston, another very cute lady.
That was a cute show.
And so they did the soundtrack. They didn't really write all the songs, but the song that they wrote for that, called Walls, is maybe the best song they've ever done. And it features Lindsey Buckingham from Fleetwood Mac. And we're going to play a clip of it right now.
'Cause you got a heart so big it could crush this town.
That was Walls. It goes, you got a heart so big. Sometimes you're happy, sometimes you're sad. Some things are over, and part of me is gone. It almost is like, it's almost like a farewell song. I mean, it was in 96, but now you can play it, and it's like, wow, part of me is gone. Even walls fall down. So, just a really great song. I think you'll recognize it if you play it. And it just is quite haunting now that he's dead. So, and I really like the acoustic version of that song. That same year, the band accompanied Johnny Cash on his Unchained album. Sometimes it was dubbed Petty Cash. And that album won the Best Country Album. And then in 99, they did another album with Rick Rubin called Echo, and it was reached number 10 in the Billboard charts.
There you did it.
There, it was in the Billboard charts. It had a couple of singles, and we played one at the start of the show, Room at the Top, and another one was Free Girl Now. I think it's talking about your new girlfriend, Rick.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So, and then my favorite album, 2002. Here is a quick tidbit from that album.
There goes the last DJ who plays what he wants to play and says
Anyway, this song, The Last DJ, came out in 2002, was played on the radio about a week, and then it was banned. And because the company...
DJs didn't like it?
I think the DJs probably liked it, but it was talking about how everybody didn't get to play what they wanted to play. It was all, taped music. Here's what you sheep are going to listen to, whether or not you like it. And that is basically what classic rock radio is now. A bunch of gibberish. We've heard it a million times before.
Yes.
We don't get to hear new music from Deep Purple. We don't get to hear new music from Tom Petty. We don't get to hear new Fleetwood Mac. But it's out there. But they won't play it. And that's what this song was about. Yes. And the whole album criticizes the music industry. Each song is fantastic. And actually, it made it to number 9 on the Billboard's Top 200 in the albums. But that's how Tom Petty was. He always was challenging the music industry. And we've got to appreciate him for that. By 2005, he hosted Buried Treasure. That was an XM program where he would just play his own, not his music that was in his archives of other bands. And that was still going on till he died, I believe. And 2006, the Heartbreakers had their 30th anniversary tour. That included several songs with Stevie Nicks appearing on them. Pearl Jam was there, the Allman Brothers, the Black Crowes. Quite a nice tour. 2010, they did their 12th album, Mojo. 2014, their 13th, Hypnotic Eye, and that debuted at number 1, the first album out of all their albums to ever top the chart. But guess what? On radio, we didn't hear a song from it. Here you've got a number 1 album. What did we hear? Nothing. That's why The Last DJ, for me, is so fantastic.
Yeah.
Because how do you have a number 1 album and you don't hear a song on the radio from it? It's because of the company horse, like he sang about. They don't care. They think we're sheep. We have to listen to what they say we have to listen to, and it's the same old stuff. It doesn't matter if it's the pop songs. You're going to listen to the top 20, or you're going to go to a station where you're going to hear the top 20 from 1 or 2 years ago. You're never going to get to hear a diverse package from all these great bands and great artists. You're not going to get to hear all their stuff. That's what I don't like about radio. Sorry I raved on so much about it, but Tom Petty was proud of me when I did it.
That's right.
Grr. By 2015, Sirius Radio had him do the Tom Petty radio station, where he would not only play all of his diverse music, but sometimes other bands that he felt were good. A very good station. I've been listening to it since he died. There's been a lot of tributes on it. People talking about how much he meant to them. Country singers, one in particular, Kenny Chesney, said that if it hadn't have been for Tom Petty, he wouldn't have ended up the way he was. He grew up listening to Tom Petty, and it pretty much steered the direction he went in his life. So Tom Petty was a really important person. He had an acting career. We're not going to talk about it, but he was on several different projects, some of them for years, like King of the Hill. He was a voice on that. His band and him made it onto the Hollywood Star of Fame sidewalk in '99.
He's known as one of the most known one-note songs of anybody. People can recognize his songs in one note, they think, more than any other artist. which I wouldn't be surprised.
That makes sense when you figure he's
does.
got 28 top 10.
28 top 10
Singles.
hits, and I bet almost at least half of those we could probably hear one note and know which song it was.
Should we try it, Mr. Porter?
We should try that.
All right, some other
What's
day.
the prize?
Caramel M&Ms is
Carmen
the
M&Ms.
prize.
I can be the
Fruit
porter.
basket.
But you have to toss them from quite a ways with
Yeah,
your mouth
100
open and try not to choke.
yard
Right, you
when
have to do a
catch it.
trick to get it.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and then in 2001, he was. They were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. There's Mr. Porter getting some
Last one.
M&Ms. So we're about ready to wrap this podcast up, but today I watched the last interview that Tom Petty did, and it was 2 days before he died, and it was an hour long, and I would just like to say a few things that I got out of it before we leave. Somewhere, somehow, somebody must have kicked you around some. That's a line from one of his songs. Damn, I wish I knew which one.
Somebody could have kicked you around some.
Is it
No, no,
Renegade?
no.
What is it? It's
You don't have to do little down, baby. Everybody's got a right to be free, 'cause you don't have to live like a refugee.
Don't have to live like a refugee.
Yeah, you don't have
To live like a refugee. Don't have to live like a refugee. And then it does go, somewhere, somehow, somebody must have kicked you around some.
Good line.
I love that from Refugee. Anyway, I don't know if that's going to make it on there.
We'll be able to edit some of that in there.
Yeah.
Somewhere, somehow, somebody must have kicked you around some.
On that interview, he talked about a couple other little fights he had with the music industry. When they tried to sell his fourth album $1 higher than the standard rate, he fought him on that, and it really wasn't even his right to fight him, but he got him to stop doing it because he cared about the consumer. And so that helped actually keep music down on everybody's albums. And then in the late 90s, when concerts were getting really expensive, he capped his concert tickets at $50. And I do believe that's what we paid when we went to Jackson, Wyoming, was $50 a pop. So here's a famous quote of his. I just love it. Do something you really like, and hopefully it pays the rent. As far as I'm concerned, that's success. So that means,
Pretty good.
do you like what you're doing, Ricky?
No.
But is it paying the rent?
No.
Then it's not success.
Well, I need to make a change.
And he talked about how plagiarism didn't really bother him. Sometimes there were accidents. The Chili Peppers had a song that could have gone to court, and Petty would have won. And but then in 2015, actually, Sam Smith did have to say that Tom Petty helped him write a song because it sounded so much like one of Tom
Yeah, I
Petty's.
remember that.
And Jeff Lynne also got credits on that. Another interesting thing about that, he was talking about the writing process, and he compared writing to fishing. Well, first of all, he'd say he'd just lock himself in a room and he'd be like, you're coming out of here with a song. And so he would work and work and work, but occasionally he says it was like fishing. Sometimes he'd leave a fishing hole and there's no fish in the boat, but he usually could come up with something, and he'd always be excited. I've got a song. And it made me picture a son of mine that wrote a song, and he popped out of his room and he says, listen to this song I just wrote. And I could just see Petty going up to the Heartbreakers, look, I got a new song. And then he talked about how he would love to hear the band play this song for the first time, and sometimes it wouldn't even sound like the way he expected it to, but it was exciting, and I thought that was really neat. And then he talked about the Heartbreakers, and he says the Heartbreakers is still holy to him. They still feel like they are on a mission for good. And when he grew up, rock and roll was a religion, and it wasn't about commerce. And he says, as long as the Heartbreakers feel holy to me, I'm staying with the Heartbreakers. And he talked about how he didn't think anything would ever break them up unless one of them died. And it's so weird. 2 days later, he died. So that was strange.
Wow. Is there a wow there, Rick?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Wowzers, says Rick. He taught him, a guy named Elliot Roberts taught him, worry about the product, not the commercial success. So what that meant was, back in the 80s, they would just push you, do a single, make this great. But in reality, all Tom Petty worried about was actual good music. Each album, he just wanted good music, and what happened. And I liked that. You can see that in his albums. And and he talked about how today albums don't hardly work anymore because kids and he's not blaming it all on kids, it's technology, everything's changed. They don't seem to have 30 minutes to listen to an album. And that's why they don't like our podcast. They don't have 30 minutes or longer to listen to us.
Yeah.
We wish it was shorter, but we're not sure they could last 15 minutes. But anyways, I found that interesting. He knew right where music was now, right what's going on. He's changed with the times, and I feel bad that Tom Petty is gone. But, he also was thanking the Lord for how wonderful his life had been and how he had gotten to do what he wanted to do. And so I thank the Lord that we had Tom Petty. And thank you for all listening. And you can check us out on our Facebook page, The Cap and Kirk Show. Also, you can check us out on iTunes. We are called The Cap and Kirk Podcast. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Captain has left the building.